I will get the recording going now. There we go. Perfect. So we're going to be talking today about how you can go about generating the best return from your digital marketing or online activities in general this year in 2023. This session, as you probably know already, but this session is all about kind of discussion. So there's no slides, it's all panel focused, lots of Q&A. So if you've logged in for this, please do ask your questions. We'd absolutely love to hear from you, kind of really want to know what you guys want to know, and then we'll make sure that those questions get answered and covered. So do not be shy. Drop your questions in the chat or the Q&A function here on Zoom. We'll make sure those get covered. The more you ask, the more fun it is, the more useful it is for everybody. So please do that. So joining us on our panel today, we've got a couple of amazing guests making up our panel. So we have Pauline McFerrin, digital content lead from McLaren Applied. And we absolutely must not get distracted talking about motorsport. That can't happen. We've got Ed Bolton, so partner manager at Trustpilot, joining us. And we have Dan Lifton, head of client services from Overdrive Digital. And then there's moi, chairing the conversation. So let's get cracking with the first kind of question, shall we? And raise your hand, jump in for any takers. But in terms of how to generate the best return from your marketing, I think what return specifically means is often quite different or interpreted differently or managed quite differently in across different organizations. So throwing it out, in your guys like day to day, how do you manage or measure what you're doing in terms of return? And what does return mean in your day to day? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. Yes, I guess for us, it's as an agency, it kind of varies client by client, but kind of the fundamentals are the same. So obviously we've got a range of clients that range from e-commerce and lead gen. So the e-commerce, we're measuring things like ROAS, so return on ad spend, the overall revenue and the bottom line. And then kind of the main thing I like to focus on is like the media efficiency ratio. So that's total revenue divided by the total media spend. So how much are we putting in and how much are we getting out of it? Because I think in a world of weird attribution these days, that for us is the clear black and white picture, which I think is kind of what everybody's looking for. You know, from a lead gen perspective, it's kind of similar, but it's around measuring a cost per MQL, but there's a bit more of a longer tail feedback loop on that involved between client and agency. So that behavior is slightly different.
Yeah.
And then return on the ad spend's pretty similar. But then there's also, from our perspective, from an agency as well. So how do we measure return and things as well? And that's done on a retention basis, on the return of keeping our clients happy and building long and fruitful relationships, growing those accounts, and then also the new business element as well. So we've kind of see quite a few different ways of measuring things for our clients and our own business as well. Definitely. So it'd be interesting to hear from Ed and Pauline as well, and kind of how they look at it versus how we do.
Yeah, I'd say similar to you, Dan, particularly from a business perspective. So for Trustpilot, it's kind of new bookings in terms of expanding existing or growing new territories. Looking at sort of account retention, how much are we growing accounts, how are we meeting sort of the needs of businesses using the platform. And then from the businesses, how are we making sure they're using all the tools that we kind of provide them with to get the most out of their reviews. So are they using their reviews within their email marketing campaigns? What are they noticing in terms of any conversion rate changes? How are they using their Trustpilot rating, for example, on the site and in what places? What are they measuring from maybe bounce rate changes or conversion rate uplifts from testing those different scenarios? And I guess looking at their online reputation, how are they maybe improving their score? How are they building the number of reviews they have to sort of come across as more credible, make sure what customers or browsers see online tallies up with sort of the representative example that the company wants to be seen as, I'd say.
Yeah, perfect. Now, how about you, Pauline? I guess from like a content and a comms perspective, measuring or looking at return can be quite different to, say, like a PPC campaign, which tends to be much closer to a direct conversions. Like, how do you look at that from your side?
Well, I guess ROI for us is very difficult to measure, obviously, in terms of content. However, because I've got 3 different business units here, all with very different activities and aims and objectives. So we've got motorsport, obviously, which is the big one. We've got transport, and we have automotive as well. So content measurement, again, playing the long game with that, can be difficult to measure. However, we are doing activities like going to trade shows, things like that, so we can measure that in terms of leads generated and things like that. With 2 of our business units, we are quite new, trying to break into those markets in terms of transport and automotive. So we're measuring kind of brand awareness and things like that. So depending on the business unit and the activity, there are a number of ways of I'm measuring it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think there's a really interesting, or like, I guess like an important point within what you just said there about, depending on the activity, depending on the context around it, you probably have to look at measuring return, or how you, or like your expectations on return in a different light, because a trade show is going to be a very different, or there should be a very different expectation on that compared to like a bit of PR content or something that might go out very early days, you know.
Exactly. And for us, it's all about having, well, for me, it's all about having those KPIs, knowing kind of what I want to achieve, as opposed to just flying by the seat of my pants and just throwing out content.
Because it still has to be accountable, doesn't it? So if you put a piece of content out, you still, you know that a direct ROI is going to be hard to measure, but you still need to have some way of making sure that it's contributing to the journey, right?
Exactly. And I mean, that can be something as small as having a conversation with somebody who say, oh yes, sorry, I know about this because I saw it on your LinkedIn, or, you know, getting a website query for related to a piece of content you put out the week before. So it can be those tiny little things that can help as well. But yeah, overall, it's that old marketing adage, it just depends.
Absolutely. So I have my question. I've actually printed out my questions, which is always it's like the KPI of how seriously I'm taking this. So there we go. My next question, I guess, is around, so looking at return, and we get some amazing questions in, by the way, so please keep them coming. I mean, we'll get to them in a second, but my next question is around, okay, to effectively manage towards a positive ROI with your marketing, you have to be on top of any trends or changes that are happening, right? So Ed, like in the world of reviews, has anything, and no is a perfectly good answer here, but has anything major shifted in terms of what you're doing with your partners, or what you're seeing with the brands on Trustpilot from 2022 into what you think is going to happen this year? Like, are there any major shifts that people need to be aware of in the world of reviews?
It's a good question. I'd say from a general adoption point of view, we're definitely seeing just an increase across the board.
Okay.
So we published a transparency report across the platform, what we're seeing, any changes. And interestingly, we saw about a 21% increase in the number of reviews written from kind of year on year, from 2021 to 2022. So I think anecdotally, we probably all sort of think about reviews more now than we did, say, 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But for brands, what we're seeing is, you know, people are writing more reviews. People are going on to Trustpilot more. So I guess it's kind of that inevitable of, is it something we're going to look at some point? Are we going to maybe try and fix our reviews or look at them now? Or are we going to hang on? Just sort of, I guess, that, you know, surge of, you know, the industry and feedback growing a lot more.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And do you think that's also because brands are doing a better job of incentivizing people to leave reviews, or having reviews as part of their, you know, follow-up process?
Yes,
combined with a bit of natural uptake.
Yeah, I think sort of more awareness of the importance of reviews and where they can fit in. I think it's often people may think, you know, our reviews are just something I can find outside of a website. But
Yeah.
then when you look at, under the bonnet where you can use them is, oh, we're already running paid ads. Why don't we showcase a great review within there? Why don't we showcase it within email campaigns? Let's look at gathering feedback at different points of the customer journey to have, at our core, we want to know what people are saying or thinking when they bought from us or where they've spoken with customer service. To then use that data as insights to understand what's going well, what's going not so well, maybe rewarding teams who are doing a really good job being mentioned, and maybe on the other hand using that as sort of business analysis to work out what are people unhappy with, why may they be churning, how can we leverage this information to improve things going forward.
Very cool. And how about for yourself, Pauline? I guess like with content, like, are you seeing any big shifts in terms of, first off, like what content's working, or like what types of content people tend to be consuming more?
Well, we can just put a picture of a race car and do some lacy marketing, and it's always going to get good engagement.
So lucky.
Yeah, if I want to be lazy, that's what I could do. For us, we get a lot of engagement on anything related to STEM, which is really interesting. So we have STEM ambassadors, and my most popular LinkedIn post this month was a photo of our STEM ambassadors at a school doing a workshop for some girls. We also get a lot of interest around careers, obviously. And anything that we do in our production department over in the McLaren Technology Centre, because I personally think that's where the magic happens. It's really cool. It's where all the motorsport parts are being built, the F1 sensors and the control units and stuff. And people just love to see behind the scenes. And they love to know the people behind the brands as well. So a lot of our Inside McLaren Applied content always gets really good engagement as well, because you're giving people that kind of insight into the people that are making the things happen within your brand. And honestly, I've been here for a year and a half now, and they have always been our most popular content. I haven't seen anything shift recently. So
that makes sense, because it's, if you've got something really interesting to show, brilliant. But I think generally speaking, people do love like that behind the scenes view.
Absolutely.
Like the human aspect of a business is always really, really good. Have you made any strides into TikTok or reel style content? This short form portrait aspect video?
Yeah, so short form video has always been popular for us. I personally am a big fan. It's short, gets to the point, it's easy to do. I can get the camera out, have something edited, and even now LinkedIn are just making it so easy. You don't even have to get on your Premiere Pro and put your captions on. LinkedIn are doing it for you. So and that's one of my actual predictions for bigger trends is a lot more kind of short form video. But it works. Has always worked for me, so it's great.
Definitely. Dan, how about from the paid aspect? Because there's always feels like 3 years of constant big shifts, but what do you think the big shifts in paid media will be this year?
I think we're already seeing it, but the automated side of things, so less control for the advertiser and the things they're more commonly using in the platform. So targeting's going away in a lot of elements in terms of Facebook now. Like, they want you to be as broad as possible and let their AI do the work, and machine learning. Same with Google with Performance Max. They want to take the control away from you. So it's kind of changing up what you can control now. So it's less about the targeting, less about necessarily really the keyword as well, and it's more around what you can control on the website. So the landing page optimization, the conversion rate optimization, kind of different creative hooks. So testing a lot more different creative outputs than you maybe were doing before, because before, especially on like Meta, it was find a really good couple of audiences and they do the heavy lifting. And the iOS changed nearly 2 years ago now, changed all of that. And then the last big one we're seeing this year is like optimizing your product feed for e-commerce brands. Like, that's where you can get the control back on the signals you send to these platforms. So it's more around the information you're giving the channels now to kind of succeed, as opposed to here's information for you to select from us. Now it's like, we're going to give you what we think is our ideal customer. Now
The
you go
data
and find them
management
for us.
aspect.
So it's the data, it's completely flipped on its head, and
Different
the people that
game.
get that are going to be the ones that succeed,
Yeah.
I think, this year.
Definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
So we've had some questions. Should we do some questions? Obviously, there's still loads of time. So if anyone does want to put more questions in, please do so. So from anonymous attendee, this is a really good one. Not every department agrees on looking at ROI from different perspectives. So how do you tackle the challenge of brand growth not having a direct ROI? Who wants to jump in on that? Pauline, do you want to jump in on that?
Absolutely. That's one of my main challenges, unfortunately, with content. For me, it's around being able to demonstrate some kind of growth. For us, we would sometimes just use the vanity metrics. I would be able to say, well, this has got really good engagement with our LinkedIn. LinkedIn's probably our main business channel. This has received really, it's got a high engagement rate. So therefore I'm deeming this as a success.
Yeah.
Again, it's really difficult. And I will always try and align the KPIs of the content with the KPIs of that person's business line or department.
Yep.
So yeah, it's sometimes you just have to get creative with it.
So kind of almost, I guess, making sure that you're speaking the recipient's language, trying to put it into their world, and trying to make sure that you're thinking about that aspect of it. Yeah, it's hard though, isn't it? Particularly for brand growth when it's it's a real, like you've used the phrase long game quite a bit, but it massively is. And there's a leap of faith a little bit, isn't there? But leap of faith doesn't make the best business case in the world. So you've kind of got to quantify it somehow. Dan, how about, I guess, from a paid media perspective, like making sure that any brand activity is having an impact on end ROI? And it's a really interesting point because it can get really vague very, very quickly, but I guess there's micro conversions you can look at, right?
Yeah, so like it can get really fluffy if we're just saying we've reached this many people, or the impressions we've got is this month, and not to discount those. So I think that's still a really good reference point of like how optimal your campaigns are in terms of if you want to grow, you've got to reach more people, right? So that's kind of, that element's right, but I think it's important to understand kind of, okay, this is the brand awareness piece, but what's the goal? So is it we want to achieve a click-through rate to the website of X, because then we know at least the people we're getting in front of are engaged, even if there's not a direct action they're taking on site, for example. Is it a video we're showing and we can see that they're watching 75% of that video? So there is these, like you said, these micro conversions, depending on the activity and the piece of content you're running, that you can start to build a picture on, like, this is having a systemic impact on growth as well, even from the comments on things as well, like how are people receiving the content we've got. I mean, we've seen some horrendous stuff posted that we think, well, we're getting completely in front of the wrong people here. So that kind of is a good indicator as well. It's just setting what you just need, like one or two clear, this is our metrics for success based on this growth element, because it kind of then brings everyone back to the center when they're having those conversations, because otherwise, like you said, there's too many voices that get in the mix. Otherwise.
Definitely. Ed, I don't know if you've got a view on that from the Trustpilot perspective.
Yeah, I'd say the fortunate thing to a degree is, by being obviously platform business, is that, you know, people who are reading reviews are going to be part of some businesses who may think about using reviews. Well, so we're quite fortunate to have the network effects of kind of that revolving flywheel of, if we're accumulating more reviews, more businesses are going to receive those, they're going to start using those, and then those business users, owners may start thinking about, should we use this for ourselves? I think we're quite fortunate in that way that, you know, one should grow the other, but tracking that aside from saying, you know, our user base has gone up by X% this year, our business base has gone up by, you know, Y%. You know, the marketing team probably have a much better idea of exactly what the correlation is from a percentage point of view. But I think we do a lot in terms of reports of, okay, how much does, Trustpilot reviews influence your decision making? What do you think when you see this, and sort of measuring that over time to have an effect and get more of a tangible ROI on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just, again, it's about like molding how you collect the right data to tell the right narrative and kind of show a full picture, I think. I don't know if this is a question or it's more of a statement. So when an agency reports to me about ROMI, my eyes glaze over and I prefer they understand the EBITDA, I guess, like the P&L, the business effect of their activities. It tends to focus attention into the right places. Having realistic KPIs is key to everything. I think that's key, because like the bottom line on all of this is what impact is it having on the overall like business performance, but realistic KPIs is really key. If there was a question with that we've kind of missed, do jump back in and ask. And if anyone else has more questions, please do kind of jump into the Q&A and drop them in there. There's one more around. Sorry, Dan.
So I was just saying, on that point, I think it is so crucial, because like you can easily get stuck in a silo. It could be a paid media team, it could be organic, it could be any sort of team. It's really easy to get stuck in a silo of your own KPI. So like the example I always use is like you could get a ROAS of 4, but if your bottom line's flat or not even growing, that you could be shouting about something that's not actually contributing to overall growth. So if that's not contributing to overall growth, that then answers the question of why. So like actually those bigger picture like numbers that actually are around the business result in better strategies, better questions being asked internally between an agency and a client to actually push the strategy forward to make real impact.
Definitely. Cool. And then there was another question around white papers, and a white paper is still a valid lead generation tool. I think my take is if they're good, they are. I don't know if anyone's got a view on that, or like Pauline, if you use gated assets within what you do and McLaren applied, but I think if they're good and they offer value, then absolutely they still work.
No, we do a lot of thought leadership pieces around technology, electrification, electric vehicles and that kind of thing. But that would be more kind of media PR activity as opposed to white papers.
Okay,
But yeah, they definitely do work for us. We do have our head of electrification is quite high profile. We call him our little mini celebrity, and he would be approached a lot for interviews, opinions, quotes, and that type of thing. And it does, it does draw traffic back to us. Absolutely.
Fantastic.
I think from my side, they definitely still work. Like just using one of our clients for an example, like we did a big analysis piece at the start of the year around what assets are driving marketing qualified leads, but also the overall pipeline. And looking at it, it was these white paper reports that are kind of a lot more bottom of the funnel, or a bit like kind of where people are in that consideration phase. They do make a big difference, but it's making sure that one, the topic's right, whether that's a timely thing, or two, if it's like just a big broader research or thought leadership piece, like you said, Pauline, they do convert well. I think they're still one of the stronger pieces, and I think it's just getting the right topic. I think the topic's always key. It's not just churning out content for the sake of churning out content because you need to hit a white paper download that month like number. So yeah, I think that's important. Ebooks as well, if you wanted to do more short form content like a white paper but a bit more visual, that's the other piece of content we're seeing work really well. Ironically, webinars aren't as strong since COVID, even though we're sitting on one
he says on
now.
Webinar,
I think people got a bit fatigued with them for a while. So again, webinars work if the topic's right and it's timely and it's really going to give you some actionable insights at the end of it.
Definitely. Yeah, there's still loads of content that does work, and I think you can there's some really good examples out there of people being really creative with them as well. And kind of I guess it's about, can you put a white paper out that stands out a bit and does something a little bit different to the other white papers in circulation at that point in time? talking about activities, so we'll come back to some questions. We've got another couple here as well, which is amazing. So thank you to everybody who is dropping questions in. Keep dropping them in. We'll come back to them shortly. In terms of activity mix or channel mix or content mix, how do you guys plan and prioritize that, again, for like an eventual positive return? So I guess, like, Dan, from the paid media side, how do you prioritize and manage like a mix of platforms? Ed, in terms of like working with your partners and all the different tactics and activities that can help them generate more reviews and kind of get more engagement, how do you prioritize? And Pauline, from a content perspective, like with all the different content, the different business units, where do you start and how do you prioritize? Who wants to go first?
Well, for me, my biggest problem is that I have too much potential content. So I do struggle to prioritize what's time relevant. Is somebody at an event? Is somebody speaking somewhere? Is something happening on this day that we need to talk about, versus content that's supporting our strategic business plan and aims and objectives in terms of higher level campaigns, thought leadership pieces, interviews, things like that. So for me, I spend a lot of time kind of shuffling and reshuffling my content plan. I'm looking at things like, is this piece of content going to be an article? Is it going to be a blog? Is it going to be a video? Is it going to be, a PR piece? So it's probably one of the biggest challenges I face. And it takes a lot of organization and sometimes a little bit of pushing back. Obviously, everybody thinks their content and their topic is the most important. So yeah, there's a fair bit of prioritization, and sometimes I'm not everybody's favorite person. But unfortunately, it has to be done. Some of our objectives are more strategic than others, and more, take priority. So as much as I do want to have the fun content, sometimes we have to do the drier business stuff.
So it's always about coming back to that. Well, look, what is it that this activity needs to achieve out of this massive list of stuff that I could do? What do I think is most likely to achieve it? Go with that first.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool. And then Ed, from a review perspective, like how there's so many different, really, well, particularly with like integrations and things like that, there's so many cool things you can do to generate more reviews from people and get more people looking at them and make sure that it's really contributing towards the end result. But how do you prioritize that activity when there's so much you could do?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess you've kind of got a split of if a brand or business has a really good online presence and say they've got a good score, for argument's sake, then in sort of the short term, they can probably kind of use everything they want to, right? If they're running ads, they could use reviews within there. If they want to show on the website, in line with kind of dev timelines, they're ready to go. Then on the other hand, you've maybe got businesses who haven't been proactive, so they may not have many reviews. They may not be in a position to want to shout about a score because they may not have it where they want it to be. So for them, it's kind of looking at the basics of start off by gathering feedback. What's the simplest place for that? For an e-commerce store, it might be after someone's had their trainers delivered, ask them for a review, for argument's sake. Sort of building up a bank of those, getting it to a place where you think, okay, now we want to start using these in marketing. We want to use these on the site. We've got we've got a big PR campaign launching in 3 months' time, or we want to be on billboards. Like, let's plan on getting our score to this place so that we can use it in that timeline. Then from there, I think once businesses have got kind of the key fundamentals in place, you can look more at the optimization and testing routes of why don't we try this within a particular flow? Why don't we start gathering feedback further down the line? If it's a finance company, why don't we ask people for a review once they've topped up their ISA or something, rather than just when they open an account or become a client, etc. To really try and leverage more of what they can do and get more out of the platform once they've got it to that initial sort of status.
Yep, that makes total sense. It's about, I guess that's like looking at the bigger plan. Okay, where are the key points within this? Okay, we really could do with a great score for that. So let's try and work towards these key points, or work, reverse engineer back from those key points. And then Dan, like Meta, LinkedIn, Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok, Google, Bing. There's a lot you can. There's a lot of places where you can spend your money, right? So how do you prioritize? How do you know where to start and what to do?
So I think Meta and Google are still the core channels that will work the best for the majority of businesses. Obviously, things can vary depending on specific sectors, but the big thing for me is like, we always get questions of like, oh, should we do TikTok? And I always come back to the priority of like, well, what's your creative team's capability like? Are you running this organically? If you're not, if you haven't even dabbled in organic TikTok, we haven't even got a fundamental approach of like what content's working yet. So for us, a lot of it's gatekeeping with questions. So like, why would you want to do this channel? If we're not recommending it, why do you want to do it? Have you got this in place? Is it something we can explore? Is it something we actually want to add into a roadmap? I'm always a big believer of getting 1 or 2 channels working well first and prioritizing them. I think if you spread your budget, your minds, your creative team's resource across many different platforms, you end up getting a lot more substandard pieces of content or work than if you just really hone in and focus. I think the big priority for us is just making sure we're recommending the best channels that come back to that overall strategic and business objectives, whether it's growing revenue, there's a certain amount of leads we need to, or MQLs we need to hit in a year. It's just making sure we're really focused on that. And then the final thing is like, obviously you always want to scale a platform, right? So it's then looking at priority of like, do we scale the channel we've got because we're getting a really good return on it? Or do we want to diversify because we don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket? So, which we'd recommend not doing as much this year now. So it's kind of where's that line in the sand of like, once we get to this spend threshold, let's start testing, and we're getting a decent return. Let's start testing a Pinterest or a TikTok, that side of things. So it's just having a clear plan, and like Ed said, a bit of a roadmap and working back of like, what's the actual end goal, and not getting ahead of ourselves and trying to do everything. Like you said, there's so many now. So it's just prioritizing what's going to get you the best return quickly.
Definitely.
And Dan, I cannot agree hard enough with you about not spreading your creative resources too thinly. I must get asked at least 3 times a week, why aren't we on TikTok? It's like,
but to do that is such a big commitment, because it's not just do one shoot. It's like, it's got to keep going and build momentum. And it's just such a good point, like looking at your resource and going, well, could we actually commit to doing this for 6 months to see how it works? Because it might not work initially.
Exactly.
It's
getting the
buy-in. That's fun, Pauline.
Sorry, John, you broke up.
I imagine that's great fun for you.
I would love us to be on TikTok. I think we have endless potential content to make really engaging and interesting TikToks. But it's the time element. Is the thing. And again, it's our ROI. Our ROI is on LinkedIn. It's not on TikTok, unfortunately.
Which raises a really interesting question around, like, when do you have to keep moving forwards and trying new things, right? And developing and finding new opportunities and taking advantage of new stuff. But when do you move away? Like, when you've got a set of activity that's really working and driving ROI, and it's like stable, it's like the steady house, right? How do you balance not like keeping that going, but moving away and not kind of harming your ability to find new opportunities? Because you've got to move forwards, but you also got to get a return. It's hard, isn't it?
We always kind of, from a paid media perspective, always want to have like a 10% of the budget allocated to whether it's testing in a channel or testing something, whether that's, if it's a large budget and 10% can stretch to another channel, great. If it needs additional commitment, that's a conversation to have. But I think it's definitely a challenging one, because you don't want to ever get stuck standing still or not looking proactive and looking forwards, because TikTok's just flown buy since it's launched, and like I had to delete it because I was so addicted to it. And
Had
it's
a bit of an,
yeah, and it's an engaging platform, and it's just
it
you know
is.
it's moving, everything's moving so fast, everything's changing in digital marketing so much. You can blink and you're already behind the curve, and you always want to try and be ahead of that curve, even if you're just dabbling your toes into the water of it. I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's an interesting challenge. There's a comment here about I am so envious of the endless potential content.
Honestly, it's a blessing and a curse. Unfortunately, I'm limited also by budget, by time, by scale. I mean, I have these amazing ideas. There's a list, and it's called Pauline's List of Crazy Ideas, of things that I am never ever going to have the time or money to do, but I can just daydream about.
I'd love to see the list.
Well, yeah, I think when I asked permission to fly a drone through our production department, there were a few eyebrows raised. So yeah, I've learned to scale it back a little bit.
Amazing. So got a really good question here again about, I guess, like stakeholder management, I guess. So within my organization at a top level, we are measured on our success based on growth on the same period last year, and have to report website visits among obviously more conversion aspects. They don't sell products as they're an education institution. So do other people face this challenge where you're doing year-on-year comparisons, but analytics are changing, cookies are changing, consents are changing? Is it still a realistic thing to measure website traffic year on year? What do you guys think? Because it's a really good point. Like, it's not necessarily apples versus apples anymore.
Yeah, it's basically what you said there, John. It's the apples versus apples. Like, obviously, everyone had the same challenge of after COVID. Like, what do you benchmark against? What year do you benchmark against? Because it was impossible, right? Especially in e-commerce. With GA4 coming in now, if you haven't been collecting the data, that year on year is going to be not there. So, you know, how do you factor that in? I'm a more believer of looking at, like, unless your content calendar or your trading calendar is exactly the same every year, yeah, great. You can kind of do an apples for apples comparison. If it's fluid, flexible, things change, I think looking back on previous periods and what you're doing, and if you're building over time, looking back quarterly, I think for me, is a better route to go down to drive growth and to keep progressing. Because if you're constantly worrying about what last year looked like, but it's actually March was bad, but then you make that up and go past it in April, it's kind of, how do you compare it, and what's the where's the line?
Year on year has been really difficult for a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, and it's only going to get harder, like you mentioned, and the question mentioned. So I don't know, like Ed and Pauline, with you guys, how you kind of report internally. Do you guys use year on year?
Well, I've only been here for just over a year, and that has been a massive period of change for us. So what I am considering, actually, this is by no means tried or tested. It's just one, again, might add it to my list of crazy ideas. It might never see the light of day. Is potentially trying to group our content, as in motorsport content has this average engagement rate, Connected Intelligence has this average engagement rate, and trying to do it like that, your year on year, as opposed to deep diving, just to give that kind of higher level overview. Because I mean, we're usually talking about people as well who don't understand marketing, and it's really difficult to kind of make them understand that how things change and the impact that it can have. So I think it may be just trying to look at things in a slightly different way.
Yeah, totally agree. Interesting quote. We're getting some really cool questions in, so thank you to everybody for asking them as well, because it does make it so much better to think. Question about ChatGPT. Ed, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this from a reviews perspective, but thoughts on ChatGPT potentially taking over content, I guess, from how do we see that from a content production point of view? Reviews, how does it fit in with that? Like, really interesting thoughts there. Ed, why don't you kick it off with ChatGPT from a review perspective? How's it gonna change your world?
Yeah, of course. I think some people sort of thought of, so a lot of businesses, they'll get a high number of reviews, right? And often people will have to reply to those. And so some people think, oh, could Chat GPT reply? Our sense is no, that wouldn't sort of be right. You're sort of taking away that really kind of customer centric focus of, we're just going to let a bot deal with this rather than us specifically. And I think looking at sort of standardized responses when people have written a review, which can often be to get feel heard, right, and sort of get their view across if they haven't had a great experience, probably isn't the way to go from our side. I think, in terms of writing reviews, it's a good question. I think it would just look quite odd. It would feel so scripted on what someone should say in a review that you aren't gonna get the emotions of people, the puns that often kind of
subtle nuance.
So I think it's a good question. In the short term, I don't think there's any sort of plans from our side and how it can be incorporated, but it is an interesting one, I think.
One to keep an eye on.
One to keep an eye on.
Definitely. Content production, have you experimented with it, Pauline? Have you tried producing any content with it? Has it worked for you? Are you steering well clear? What's your opinion?
So I've actually used ChatGPT a couple of times, but it's mainly for my own use because I work with a lot of technology, and as a non-technical person, sometimes I'm a bit lost. So sometimes I'll put the concept into ChatGPT and it'll break it down for me, which is super useful. And then I'll kind of relay my understanding to my more technical colleagues, who 99.9% of the time are like, yes, that's exactly how it works. So it helps me in my job in that aspect, but
really clever.
I don't know if I would trust AI to do my job for me. I know our marketing is B2B, but there are still people behind the B. So for me, it's all about that connection, and content is about kind of taking people on those journeys. And sometimes you want to evoke emotion. And I don't foresee using it for any of my stuff in the near future.
It's definitely an interesting topic of debate. Dan, I know, has got some. Dan does his weekly meal plans on ChatGPT.
It's good for meal plans, inspiration. It gives you an ingredients list, which is great because it saves me a load of time from online shopping. But I actually did a session internally on how we can use it as paid media professionals earlier in the week, and I use it more for inspiration than anything.
Like a starting point.
So hooks that we may not have thought of that it will come back with. So I used a video doorbell as an example. It came back with security, never miss a delivery, peace of mind, see who's at your front, speak to whoever's at your front door. So there's loads of different hooks, and you can just imagine it could stem off some ideas around ad copy. It's quite good at you're not very technical and you can't write scripts and things. It can do that. And if you're waiting on a developer, Google Ad Scripts, for example, is a good one. If you've got a specific problem, it's not bad at actually producing a very simple script. So I see it from my perspective and our agency perspective as a tool to inspire or kind of sense check things, or just kind of see if there's anything we've missed in terms of copy or audience research. It's really good at identifying competitors, which is interesting. But the big thing with it is how you prompt it. So the more information you give it, kind of what you want to get out of it over multiple iterations, that's when you'll get the quality out of it. So again, people that learn that probably going to be the ones that do really well out of it. And I know people have already got massive blogs and loads of content that's really quite good, but they've had to train it and prompt it quite a lot.
But it's definitely not about, I think what everyone's agreeing on here is it's not write me all my ad copy, do this, do that. It's about using it in smart ways to get a bit of inspiration or a bit of a starting point or a bit of a breakdown on something. But yeah, if anyone's got their opinions on it, drop it in the chat, and I think it's a fun topic. Any final questions as well, drop them in. There's one here around, so hi there, I'm a social media manager at a digital marketing agency. We are seeing a shift in Instagram's algorithm, moving away from short form video and back to optimizing carousel posts. Do you think other social platforms will follow? So is that a trend that anyone else has spotted? Do we think that's a trend for this year? Any thoughts on that? Because I would have thought there's a lot more, I get a lot more reel-based content in my feed. So it's an interesting point.
Yeah, I think from what I've been reading and seen from Instagram themselves and conversations, I think they are starting to try and move back to what the core of it was, which was a photo sharing app, essentially. Engage with your network as opposed to getting suggested posts from random accounts that you don't know. I think they tried to go after the TikTok user, and it's just backfired on them massively. So I think they're trying to go back to the core element and get the users back that way, of the ones that don't want lots of video or want something different from what they're using on TikTok, for example. So I agree with that point. That's probably why they're prioritizing the carousel, because they're starting to like probably move away from Reels, but I don't think they're anywhere near doing that yet. But there was an article, I think it's Adam Mosseri, who's the head of Instagram, that kind of announced they're moving back towards more photo or static style. So I think it's too convoluted now. There's too much going on in Instagram, in my opinion. I don't get the purpose of it from an organic perspective compared to like other channels anymore. I don't know what everyone else thinks on that.
I completely agree. I personally I'm not a big fan of TikTok, and whenever I saw Instagram, I'm all about the Instagram. So whenever I saw Instagram starting to go the way of TikTok, I just, as a personal user, I was just like, oh crap, here we go, I'm not really enjoying this. So I am glad that it's coming back now to the content of the people that I follow and whose content I want to see, rather than just having things thrown at me.
Yeah, I think on the question, do you think other social platforms will follow? They all tend to follow, like with stories, and suddenly like LinkedIn stories, right? Twitter moments. So yeah, if it works, I think they will all follow in some respect. I guess we'll come back to maybe a final question from here in a moment, but my final question is, working around the virtual room, like what would your, I guess, like brief one big thing be for 2023? Like if there's one thing to focus on in your own respective areas, what would that be? Who wants to kick that one off? Go on, Ed. Go on, Ed. Reviews.
As in for brands, what we would suggest, or
one big piece of advice for 2023 for brands, or anyone looking to kind of grow their review profile.
Yeah, I guess in kind of trends, and kind of you and John and kind of you, Pauline, Malone, is more like people looking for more credible and authentic content generally, more engaging. Brands with a purpose has obviously grown so much recently.
Yeah,
looking to sort of almost be part of a community if they're looking to engage with a brand. So I think where reviews can help is obviously seeing feedback from people who bought from somewhere, having that trust. Cost of living. So we did a report looking at the sentiment and reviews, and generally positive sentiment's down, negative sentiment is up, and people
more happy.
People not happy. About 30% of people in reports think businesses have taken advantage of them to some degree. So cost of living. So while the pounds are a bit tighter, so we're all probably going to be taking a bit longer and be more considered in the purchase. So our advice would be, people are probably going to be going out their way more than before to find some reviews, to either, have one final thing they want to check off. If they don't want to buy, sort of justify, why didn't I buy it? If they are going to buy, it's going to be crucial for them to know, am I going to have a good experience? What have other people said?
Yeah,
that buyer's remorse feeling. That's probably be my one, hopefully summed up.
Fantastic, thank you. Pauline, What's your big thing for the year ahead?
My big thing, and it's so simple. One of my mentors told me this a long time ago, and it's so true. It's just understand your audience, understand who they are, how they consume their content, where they're hanging out. Are they on Instagram? Are they on LinkedIn? Are they on, God forbid, TikTok? And how they consume their content. Are they readers? Are they video watchers? And remember, you are not your audience. So
Yep.
just because you are reading something and you think, oh, this is great, and it's something I have to be very aware of in my role, because I'm working with a lot of blue people, engineers, people who look like facts and figures. And it's not always a case of telling a story. Sometimes it's just thinking, right, this is what we've got. How can I convey the benefits to this person
Yep.
who likes facts and figures? And I'm looking at something and thinking, this is a bit dull, but it actually generates
It's
a load of
exactly what
leads
they
or a
need.
load of
Yeah.
interest. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just thinking. I'm not a huge fan of customer personas, so to speak, but if you're really understanding the benefits of what you're offering to the person, and who they are, is
Yep.
just it's so key.
Yep.
So key.
Yep. Fundamentals. Like you can
Absolutely.
look at all the shiny stuff, new stuff that's happening, but the fundamentals still matter, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Like if I was to create an amazing piece of content that we're aiming towards kind of race engineers or team principals and post it on, TikTok, like it might be fantastic, but it's not hitting the right audience. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's just about knowing who they are and
Yeah.
where they are.
Yeah. Totally agree. Dan, paid media, the big thing for
Yeah.
the year.
I think-
what's your view?
Yeah, it comes back to something I said earlier. So I think it's understanding that what you control outside of the platforms now is as, if not more important than what you do inside the platform.
Yeah.
I think more people spend more time outside of the platforms now and optimizing things in their control. So the landing page, where are people dropping off in the e-commerce funnel? Like, is it an add to cart issue? Like, I think that mindset is the most important thing this year, like controlling things outside of the platform, as opposed to being really in the weeds, because it's only going to get more automated over the next 2 years, I think, to a point where we will have no control on that.
Yeah.
And I think if you bury your head in the sand on it, and you don't have those skills now, you're going to struggle, I think, in 2 years.
Yeah.
So
100%. So
that'd be
learn a
mine.
new way.
Nice. Learn a new way.
Nice.
If that's communicating with teams that manage the landing page process, the conversion rate optimization process, that's great, but make sure you've got those relationships internally if it's not something you have physical control over yourself, and get the buy-in.
Definitely. Brilliant. Cool. Right, I think we've got time for one final question, and maybe we should all give like a quick opinion on it. So I've heard multiple times in recent months that SEO is dead, much like organic social media. Do you agree? With a limited budget, is it still worth committing time to blogs, etc., to target organic traffic? My view is yes, absolutely, because you're building like a fundamental base of content and engaging material with your audience. So I vote yes. Who's next?
Okay, I vote yes as well, purely because that's the fundamental base. If you haven't got any organic traffic coming to the site, you can have the best site in the world, the best converting website in the world, but if people can't find you and you haven't got the money to spend to acquire that traffic long term, where are they coming from? So I think it's an important part in the whole mix.
Massively so.
100%.
Massively.
Pauline.
So SEO is something that was quite new to me until last year, and I worked on maybe the year before, and I worked on a massive piece, and I actually managed to get an organic page to the #1 search spot, which I was delighted about. So I am all for yes. Yeah, like you just said, you could have an amazing site, and if nobody can find your content, what is the point? So yes, I am aware that it's a hell of a lot of work. And it's way more complicated than I could ever have imagined, but yeah, absolutely. although it's something I would say is absolutely worth getting an expert in to do, getting an agency to work with, because it's more difficult than it looks.
Proper skill set, isn't it? Ed, organic. Would
I'd
you still
say-
invest effort in it?
Yeah, I'd say in my sort of limited sphere, yes. So from a customer or business perspective, so like Trustpilot is kind of feeds into Google's kind of EAT kind of expertise, authoritativeness, and trust. So having reviews from people coming in, hugely important in that sort of just overall image of a company and just sort of at the top of the funnel searches. So businesses can create Trustpilot profiles for free and have a free plan. So it's a great way to build presence if people search for reviews, just to have that person, I'd say.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Well, look, I think that kind of wraps it up really nicely. Massive thank you to everyone who logged in. Thank you for all the questions. And of course, thank you, Ed, Pauline, Dan, for joining. Would love to know what you guys, like the attendees, think. So drop us a note if there are any follow-up questions that we didn't quite get to. Let us know. And very much hope everyone enjoyed it as much as we've enjoyed doing it.
Cheers.
See you
Thanks,
next time.
everybody.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.